The civilization of the rock cutters, the nature people, left behind not only rock-cut dwellings designed to house many millions of people, but also hundreds and possibly even thousands of kilometers of rock-cut passages. The most spectacular passages of this type are found in the Italian regions of Lazio, Umbria, and Tuscany. Locally, they are called Via Cava. But how could relatively simple folks chisel all this out? At places, the Via Cavas are deeper than 30 meters. That's a lot. And they go on and on and on. During the second NewEarth expedition to Italy in November 2018, we were lucky to find some clues and some tool marks which seem to provide at least a general understanding of how the Via Cavas were made. The Via Cavas, at least those of central Italy, were cut into the relatively soft tufa stone, and more than 90% of the tool marks visible on their sides resemble chisel marks, something like oversized chisel marks. But the new thing that we found out during this expedition was that the passages makers were using machines as well. We did notice a couple of these long marks on the walls of a Via Cava during the first expedition as well, but since it was a very small segment and because it really resembles the size of a modern, let's say, car tire track, that time we interpreted them to be some sort of tracks climbing on the walls. But during the second expedition, we found so many new sites and so much more tool marks that I understand that it is actually the other way around. Some of the marks on the ground, which really look like vehicle tracks, could be indeed marks left by the excavating machines.
Although most of the walls of the Via Cavas are obviously quite eroded, we managed to find a few spots here and there where the tool marks were very well preserved. At this particular spot, the tool marks were so crisp that if the rest of this very same mark wasn't eroded like everything else, I would think that it is modern. It's so well preserved.
Those few small portions where the original surface did not erode are either wavy, like here, or they're perfectly smooth, just as if polished, like here. I don't know what kind of equipment has left it, but I can say for sure that it wasn't a chisel. A chisel wouldn't leave meters long mark which is perfectly smooth. The overall impression based on this spot and few others is that whatever tool was used, it was actually scooping the tufa when it was in a much softer state than it is now. Probably the mixture was still very young and not yet hardened. There could be other explanations as well. For example, the overall conditions on Earth at that time might have been so drastically different that even stone was softer at that time. When the tufa is still in a soft state, it is very similar to clay or mud, and it wouldn't be at all hard to leave all these marks that you see now. And no surprise that these excavator machines were leaving a perfectly smooth surface behind. After all, they were applying pressure to something very similar to clay, let's say. Some of the scratches could be also a result of overloaded vehicles with all kinds of stuff sticking from them. They could also very easily scratch the relatively soft walls of the via cavas. Also, what looks like rather large chisel marks could be simply marks left by the tools for scooping the soft, clay-like, immature tufa. And not only the marks are a bit too large to be left by chisel, also under normal circumstances the chisel breaks off a little bit of the stone, while what we often saw on the via cavas is that the tool penetrated inside quite deep and kind of moved the substance aside, did not break it off. Yet another indication that the tufa was probably much softer than now.
Like here, these marks, if they were chiseled out, they should be broken here, where the tip hit the rock, it cracks. Yeah. But now it's like they entered inside the rock a little bit, inside, without breaking. And it's for all the marks, almost here.
Yeah, another clue that it was way softer, way softer. Another example here, the tool did not break off the material. Instead of that, the substance kind of formed small protrusions, which normally happens when you have a flexible, somewhat soft material. This is not normal for solid stone.
And here's yet another spot with very strange tool marks. All this is a historic hewn wall. It is on a village road, and all kinds of vehicles are allowed to pass here. It's not a protected area by any stretch of the imagination. So, theoretically, this could even be modern. But it is kind of strange, because the stone looks burnt, as if melted where the thing scraped along. It's polished. I think this type of Cutting of stone is achievable by modern technology today, but it's not very common. Probably the maximum attention that a remote village road in Italy would receive is maybe some sort of excavator which would break the stone, but it wouldn't melt it. How likely would it be that someone would have brought sophisticated stone cutting technology here if they don't bother to even repair the roads in their own capital, the famous Rome? So, most likely this is yet another spot with tool marks left by historic, unknown machines or devices.
Out of all the via cavas we've seen so far, this one has the biggest number of these machine tool marks. And it is also one out of the many, possibly even hundreds of via cavas, which are still used as roads. The machines used to dig via cavas were not only scooping away material, they also apparently had some sort of protrusions coming in all kinds of sizes, which used to penetrate the tufa and then come out. This mark was left by a relatively smaller protrusion. And this one is slightly bigger. Again, the mark looks and feels exactly as if something got stuck in a soft material which later on hardened.
Every time they get to inside, they take it away and restart.
Yeah, they get
And this
stuck.
looks the shape of the stuff they were using. The lower part is longer than the upper part. But there is no crack, nothing.
Yeah. This is unexcavated part. It's just beautiful. And then on the walls of the via cava with the numerous tool marks, again these protrusions were getting stuck regularly. And then sometimes they would use much wider tools. Here the marks are over 30 centimeters wide. And again, those small segments which did not erode show that the original surface was perfectly smooth, as if polished. And I wouldn't be surprised at the slightest if at the end it turns out that even these marks were left by machines with very small size protrusions. I'm sure many of you found it somewhat strange sounding when I started mentioning immature tufa, soft tufa, powdered tufa, young tufa stone, because we have been told again and again that these tufas are millions of years old, or at least hundreds of thousands years old, while the Via Cavas seem to bear some connection with cultures which thrived 1000 or 2000 years ago. But that may seem contradictory only as long as one believes all the supposedly scientific stuff they tell us on TV and in school. In Italy, we found evidence again that the geological layers are in no way as old as they want us to believe. I promise you really a lot of new stuff in the following episodes with the results of this expedition.